please, Mark.
Maloney. Gerza. Here. Osterloo. Here. Genslinger.
Here.
Sonny. Here. Penny. Dozier.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest. We've all seen the packet of proposed agenda items. Does anyone have a conflict of interest on any of those proposed agenda items? Hearing none, let's go on to approving the agenda that has been sent in the packet.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the agenda be approved as presented. Is there a discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I assume that you are all in favor, ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the 11th of April.
We do need to amend them just for 7 and 8. I have variance on there and said it should be conditional use for what it is. So.
Wondered about that.
Yep.
All right, is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded that the minutes be approved as amended. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Next meeting schedule should be on the 9th of May.
Move to approve.
Motion for the plan.
I motion.
Second. Moved and seconded that the next meeting scheduled for the 9th of May be approved. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion is carried. All right. First other item on the agenda is a variance for Steve Laughlin at 925 East 7th Avenue. He has applied for a variance for an accessory building to be located in the front yard, located at 925 East 7th Avenue, legally described as Lot 4, Block 6, FM Green Edition, City of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota. The said real property is zoned R2 Family Residential District. Talk to us a little bit, Mark, please.
Applicant would like to build a garage, which is considered the front yard because their house is actually in the back of their property. It's been there, I think he told me, they pulled up floorboards and there were newspaper articles from the 1930s. So it's been that way as a residence for a long time. He's proposing to build a garage. Access will actually be to the east of the property, so there is an existing driveway that goes the whole length of it already. You can see that there. So there will be no garage doors that will face 7th Avenue. Garage doors will be on the east side of it. There were 3 responses in your packet that were in approving of it. I did receive one more this morning, so 4 total that have approved the variance request for it. The applicant is on the line if you have any questions for him at all.
All right. Steve, would you like to make any comments? Were you able to hear our discussion?
Yes, I was. No, I have a father who lives in there. He's a stroke victim, and he just needs a little bit more room to park his Jazzy and have a little workshop to tinker in. So that's why we're requesting that.
Okay. I have a question. Are you excited to make it kind of look like a house from the street?
Yeah, in fact, it'll almost look identical. The front of it from 7th Street will almost look identical to what already looks like the front of that house. So it'll have 2 windows on the side there. It'll look just almost identical. But it's inside a privacy fence, so no one really even sees the house back there now. So it's just way back there in the back of nowhere.
All right. Does anybody in the audience have any questions about what's being proposed here? If not, does anybody sitting around this conference table have any questions for our Steve? Hearing no further discussion, I assume we are ready to make a motion. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a motion a motion be made to approve this variance? I think that's what it is, yes. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. Let's go roll call, Mark.
Jerza.
Yes.
Osterloo.
Yes.
Genslinger.
Yes.
Sonny.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
Good luck on your project. Any
Thank you very
questions?
much, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Any questions for us?
I'll just obtain a building
Aye,
permit when
aye.
you're ready.
Yep.
We'll talk next week, or you'll be this next Monday night.
Yeah, it's the council meeting. Okay,
Yep.
thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, next item on the agenda is a plat of Lot 8K, Block 7 of Westwood, First Edition, a subdivision of the southwest quarter of Section 16, Township 103 North, Range 60 West of the 5th parallel meridian, City of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota, as requested by CJM Consulting Incorporated. What's going on there, Mark? Anything special?
We discussed this a little bit at last meeting. We moved to table it for further drainage information. In the packet, you've got the original drainage study. SPN did a revised plan in 2020 that this board approved for the master plan for the drainage as well. And then recently, we held up the building permits for the two buildings that were going to be on Lot 8-K until a new drainage study was done from SPN, and that was to cut the ditch was the resolution from that over on the bypass. I'll let Joe go into further details with everything on it.
Okay?
So, yeah, yep, as Mark said, this was tabled last meeting for additional information. As Mark said, you guys did approve a updated master plan along with verifying the drainage calculations in June of 2020. There was need to do some additional information for the area south of the storage units. That was handled through a building permit process where SPN did some additional information as requested by Chuck Macheski in order to approve those building permits. The resolution was to cut down the bypass ditch by approximately 3 feet to allow the 100-year overflow to basically spill into the next drainage basin at that location, which provided the needed information to approve those building permits. And I believe this plat is just identifying those buildings to be sold. So with that, I guess I recommend approval of the plat.
Okay. Lots of technical data there that I hope everybody kind of got a look at and figured it out. Have those improvements been made?
If you drive by the bypass, they're being done currently. The way that was set up was we did an agreement with Mr. Macheski that those improvements need to be done. I can't remember the exact date, but we put liquidated damages on them for them to be completed. And they are being done, so within the time frame.
Okay. Anybody got any questions for our city engineer or city staff?
So Joe, when Mr. Bathke was here last meeting talking about his concerns about drainage in this area, based on what's been done and what's been approved previously, that's really not an issue then, correct? I mean, if it's an engineered type situation here.
So the drainage way that Mr. Bathke is discussing is a private drainage way, and that's how the city looks at it. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I see Mr. Bathke's in the audience. Do you have any comments?
I sure would.
One of the owners on the western part of this property
Justin Teasy, did come in this morning, just 20 minutes ago, and we had requested him to maintain the drainage to the south of his building because a construction person looks like they may have put an access in there and built a little levee across to drive across that ditch between his property and Jamie Rexroth's property. And Justin said over the weekend he had to tear all that out and shorted it back up, pulled any stuff that was in the drainage easement up and out of there right by that very end of Mad Garage. And I have not seen it. He just told me he did it now. I can probably go out after here and I'm going to take a look and get a picture of it. Whether or not that has any implications on this, but that was one of the questions, and that's been done to my knowledge. Until I go see it.
Okay. Mr. Bethke.
I just have a couple comments on this document that SPN, I'm assuming they supplied it to you folks too at some point in 2020. And it says on number 5, existent open ditches. Like you just said, they weren't open. Now they are. I did see it. They cleaned it out. Yeah, it's cleaned out. Yeah, and then Mr. Sonny made the comment about you could a drainage ditch doesn't necessarily need to be, if it says 22 feet wide, doesn't need to be 22 feet wide. I agree to that. But right in this document, it says it should be 10 foot wide at the bottom. When you put a 2-foot culvert in, it's not 10 foot wide. And it does not fix. Me and Joe sat and Mark for 45 minutes last week and discussed it. He says it's a private matter between him. It is, but somebody gave a building permit to build a building over a drainage easement. And now if you go out there, and I invite John when he does go out there to check this afternoon, there's a bag halfway up at blocking it because it has a hug panel in there and it's catching all the debris. It's supposed to be 10 foot wide at the bottom, tapered 4 to 1, I believe. I can't change that. I can fix mine and widen it out as I did. If you drove out there like I told you guys to do, you'd see I've actually widened mine out to help compensate for any backup, because it's not a matter of if, it's when. We will get rain eventually. Thank you.
Anything else? Any questions for me? If not, the item before us is to approve a plat of Lot 8K, Block 7, Westwood, 1st Edition subdivision, the southwest border of 16-103-6. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion?
Chairman, do I have the floor? We're just supposed to approve a plat here of the master plan. That's all are we supposed to handle any other stuff that's involved with this? Or is just the plat?
This is just the plat.
May I speak?
Yes,
Okay,
please do.
all right. I'm Justin Teasy, I own All Store, and I've got a contract on this plot to buy. Mike's talking about a culvert that goes underneath our storage facility, which was done the right way through building permits. We do have 5 ditches counting that culvert that drains water to the north. We've got 2 on Ullman, 2 on Commerce, and now the bypass. That's not counting the culvert, I guess. So we've got 6 ways for water to flow north. And there is ditches that go east and west, 4 different directions along there. So this place is pretty well designed for drainage, probably better than most places in Mitchell, South Dakota. And that hog grate, I put that on that culvert because I don't want any debris inside the culvert. No different than a grate above a drainage in any street we have in town. Do you guys have any questions on that?
Does it get cleaned once in a while?
The grate?
Yes.
Well, there might be a bag against it, I don't know, but I look at it every day, so with the wind we've had, who knows? But there is alternate, like I said, we got 5 alternate routes besides this culvert. You know, anybody else in town would dream of having 5 alternate routes of drainage. But yeah, we do anything the city asks, we do immediately. I mean, we've spent more money on drainage between me and Chuck than most people I know in this town.
Any further questions?
So is that west building, is that on the easement then?
Which building are we talking about?
There's 2 new buildings on that lot, right?
On the one we're looking to plot?
Yeah.
No, it's not on a ditch. There's a ditch behind there, approximately 20 feet behind the building, there's a ditch.
So, yeah, but you're not even close to the easement.
No,
Okay.
you can't build, we couldn't build that on an easement there, so. I mean, we had a 100-year flood. Nobody flooded out there.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, have you experienced?
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys, the city can tell me, but you guys took thousands of cubic yards out of your retention pond this summer, or this fall. I mean, and now we're taking 3 feet out of a ditch. You know, we're sitting better than we did when we had that rain, and nobody flooded. There's lots of places in town that flooded. We didn't flood. I would be out of business if it flooded.
All right.
That's the last thing I want.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
And there's a culvert underneath there.
Well, there's a culvert underneath the storage units, correct, right there where your
Yeah,
pointer
culvert
is.
on the north side of this development right here. There's no culvert, I don't believe, on the south side.
No.
That's the open.
Now that-
there.
I mean, that culvert was put in before I bought the property, but it was done, engineered correctly. It's a cement 2-foot culvert. It was wrapped with cloth. I mean, everything was done according to what we were supposed to do.
36-inch culvert.
It's 36 inch, okay.
Well, that should handle it. So when Mike said somebody had water backed up to them, it's just the one in,
I've got probably 4 acres of retention pond of my personal property. That's, you know, ask Mike how much retention pond he has. I don't know. Not very much. Probably none.
All right, folks.
Did you want to speak, Jeff? I think anything helps.
I guess I don't have a whole lot to add other than what was made, comments were made. There's about 4 or 5 different paths that this water can go before it starts backing up to the end of the elevations. The new grading that's being completed now is lowering that overflow elevation by a little over a half a foot from any of the other locations. The other locations are both of the ditches in North Commerce, and then North Alman. North Alman is also lower than, you know, what Bathke's garage floor elevations would be at as well. So yeah, there's numerous different ways that can flow through on all of this. Obviously, all of those are, you know, high spots overflow going into it, but if it starts to back up to that point, then they will have those other routes going through there.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
I would like to add, Justin says that how much overflow I have.
Can you do it up at the podium?
Yep.
He wants to talk about how much overflow I have. I followed the master plan that was there when I came. Whoever built the building, I know he didn't build it. They didn't follow the master plan. They built over an easement. I don't care if the culvert's 2 foot or 3 foot. It's supposed to be 22-foot wide drainage easement. It's right on the master plan. And I don't know how you get away from that.
A little late now.
Not necessarily. I know a guy over in Sioux Falls built a house too close to a house. Came down.
Well, Mike, let me ask you a quick question. So, have you experienced flooding?
I'm trying to find the picture. I have it up to my building. Okay? That's before we put all this other buildings and stuff in there. And I trust that SPN knows what they're doing. And Joe's telling me that it's going to handle it. But I just don't know how it gets through that 2-foot culvert. And they talk about 6 different ways. They go through that 2-foot culvert. I don't get it. And I know you guys probably drove out and seen it. I just don't get it. And I don't care if it was engineered to go under a building. I highly doubt it was engineered to go under a building.
Well, so when was this building
I don't know.
built? Like a long
After
time
me.
ago?
After me. That's all I can tell you.
Oh,
After me. Yeah, I was the first, and now I'm first and second out there.
So with what Mr. McCormick's saying about there's really 5 pathways for the water to drain on here, there's kind of some redundancy. So you're still concerned that your property may be in
Yes.
jeopardy if all 5 of these routes plug up? I mean, would all 5 have?
It's not necessarily the plugging. If we get the massive rain, it all has to try and funnel north at the same time.
Yeah.
And I know the city went and dug out that pond, their holding pond on the north end there, which is a whole nother can of worms. Why would the taxpayer lower a holding pond for a developer? Can't figure that one out either. Because that's what we did. The taxpayers paid because it was under-designed. That's a whole nother bag of worms here. But my problem is it's all got to go through that culvert. I don't care if there's 6 or 7 different ways. I agree. But now we're chasing that water. And Joe probably could tell you this. I don't know for sure, but it looks to me like we're bringing the water on the bypass all the way back to the south, trying to bring it west, south of Ryan Shaw's facility, which comes all in there. So it's going to get congested right there. And the city was flooded out when this happened. Northwestern's substation had 2.5 foot of water in it.
So just out of curiosity, have you talked to another engineer about this? Not SPN, but another engineer?
No.
To get an opinion?
No.
On,
Nope.
is there really an issue, or is it?
Nope, I've talked to Jeff when they did an elevation drawing, and the only thing he told me, he was surprised the elevation of my building was higher than he thought it would be. But no, I haven't. I don't think that's my responsibility here.
Well, I know, but you're obviously concerned about it, and all these guys do is determine all this stuff by calculation.
Mhm.
They don't invent how to do this.
Nope.
It's engineered.
Yep.
And that's basically what I would base my judgment on, is if it's engineered, not if I think it's gonna flood or it has flooded. If it
Right.
has flooded, it's different. Or if you just think it's gonna flood, that's different. But if it's engineered, that's even something different. So, I mean, based on the business I'm in, if it's engineered, the engineer's responsible, it's good. You know, I mean, that's
Yep.
just my position on the whole thing.
I see where you're coming. I totally understand what you guys are doing.
I'd say, yeah, we need to, rethink the thing, but I'm just trying to, I guess, figure out if you've had a problem, or you know for sure there's gonna be a problem, or you just think there's gonna be a problem, and how does that affect you using your property? You can't get to it, you can't use it, I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to
Understand.
determine the real deep down concern that you have, not will water flow, will all this water flow through a small culvert? Obviously, the engineers say it will, or they would have done something different. I mean, that's based on kind of my thinking here.
Well, they are doing something different. They're creating another holding pond
Yeah.
for that.
By ordinance, you're required to have an overflow path for the 100-year event.
Okay.
So south of those buildings, before the ditch was cut down, there was not. So cutting this ditch down brought that portion of the ordinance in compliance. So now there's a foot of freeboard from the lowest building that will flow through that ditch. That was the purpose of that was what we required in order for those building permits to be approved.
Okay. So everything previously was all thought through, engineered, and designed to comply with, you know, the ordinances or the whole rules of the whole storm drainage system.
Yep, so the original master plan was approved in 2003. Our drainage ordinance came in, was it 2016? And so we did some further digging into the details, and that was one item that we found that needed to be done to bring that area into compliance to our ordinance.
All right. Thank you for your information. We're still looking for a motion to approve the plat.
Well, I'm going to make the motion to approve it because I feel the engineering work and the background, all this, there was a problem that has been resolved, in my eyes anyway, so I'm going to make a motion to approve the plat.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the plat. We've had a whole bunch of discussion already. Is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. Let's go roll call again, please, Mark.
Osterloo.
Yes.
Genslinger.
Yes.
Sonny.
Yes.
Jerza.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, next item on the agenda is a plat of lots 9 and 10, block 2 of the Woods First Edition of subdivision of the east half of the southwest quarter of section 23-103 north, range 60 west of the 5th parallel meridian, city of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota. Excuse me, as requested by CJM Consulting Incorporated.
They're looking to plat 2 more lots up there. It's following along with their master plan up there.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded that the plats be approved as presented. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign, motion carried. Next item, a plat of Lot L, a subdivision of previously platted Lot S of Maui Farm Second Edition, City of Mitchell, Davidson County, South Dakota, as requested by Maui Farms Incorporated. This is another one that looks like it's been,
Yep, it's following right along with all the other lots that have been out there.
yep. This is kind of holding right next to the railroad track, isn't it?
Yep, yep, just off of Maui Drive.
Yep.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this plat be approved. Discussion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign, motion carries. Number 11, a plat of Tract 1 of Blackstein Edition in the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 2, Township 102 North, Range 60 West of the 5th parallel meridian, Davidson County, South Dakota, as requested by Scott Blackstein. County's probably going to have to do their sign of cross on this one too, aren't they?
Yep, this is outside of the 1 mile ETJ, but it's within the 3 mile platting jurisdiction, so the city has to hear it. Currently, it's been described by measurements, so they can't get a building permit in the county. That's their ordinance. So I believe he's looking to get a building permit. If you remember back a couple of years ago, there was a big fire down on his place down there. The concrete slab is still there, so I'm assuming that they're going to just rebuild on that location right there.
So it's got to be platted in order for them to do it.
Correct.
Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this plat be approved as discussed. Are we going to put a caveat on it that the county's got to approve it too? I don't think
It's already required anyways.
Yeah.
And they'll hear it the first Tuesday and the second Tuesday of May.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. A plat of Lot 3 of Wagner's Addition in the southwest border of Section 4, 10360, requested by Matthew and Julie Janel? Woman.
Again, this is outside the ETJ, but within the 3 mile. They are purchasing the property. They'd like to put a shed on that property. They own 40810 257th Street. So they connect right to it. There are no existing approaches off of 408 or 257, so any of that would either have to be approved by the county highway shop for on 407 or 257 would have to be approved by the township board. So, and they know that. This again will be heard by county first Tuesday and second Tuesday.
Discussion. Hearing none, I assume you're ready to make a motion to approve or disapprove.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve. Discussion. Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign, motion carries. All right, a presentation, and Justin, I assume between you and Joe, you're the guys that are working on this for us, right?
Just me, I think. Mark's going to give the assist here on flipping through the slides, it looks like, but I'll try to keep things brief. I know that it's probably not the most exciting subject matter, but so.
Can I interrupt here a second, Justin?
Sure.
Guys, you all need to go to the area planning conferences once in a while, because this is exactly the kind of stuff that you're going to look at planners conferences every now and again, just to refresh your minds on how things are supposed to operate. Thank you.
When is this?
Those are usually held in September or October every year.
Thank you, Justin, for the opportunity.
All right, well, as I have listed on there, this isn't meant to be a comprehensive presentation by any means. It's just a couple of brief pointers and a couple of tips to try to keep things flowing smoothly and help keep your record clean. So first thing I wanted to touch on was how council and boards have authority to set their own rules. So this board certainly has that ability. A lot of meetings end up defaulting to using Robert's Rules of Order, which in large part we kind of follow those. But there's no requirement that we'd have to. And even if you do kind of unofficially use Robert's Rules, you're free to modify those. So we'll touch on why we use the rules, and the main purpose of that is to ensure that the body is able to conduct their business in an orderly manner. It helps provide structure, helps prevent people from talking over each other, and allows everybody an opportunity to speak on the subject. Yeah, John, John's already sat through all this, so if you...
I just wanted to call the question.
Yeah, there you go. So it's meant to give everybody a fair chance, an opportunity to speak, and to do so in an orderly manner. And by doing that, it helps you maintain a clear record of the events, the discussion, and the actions that the body's taking. So this board's been in place a long time, but for many boards, one of the first things that they'll do is they'll establish the presiding officer. The presiding officer is in charge of keeping order during the meeting, ensuring that the business is discussed appropriately. Presiding officer is also in charge of recognizing speakers. So whether it be somebody from the audience or somebody on the board, if you're following the rules strictly, nobody should be speaking until they're recognized by the chair. In addition, the presiding officer is also responsible for handling motions, amendments, calling for votes, all of that kind of stuff. So typically what will happen is the Chair will call a certain agenda item. They'll hand the floor over to staff or an individual to give a little bit of brief introductory information on that item. And then at that point, the members of the body aren't typically involved in the discussion unless they've got some kind of brief clarifying question. And then once that introductory period is over, usually things will swap over to the board to make a motion and have discussion on that motion or discussion amongst themselves. So that takes us to a little discussion on motions themselves. So a council or board needs to act and take official action as a unit. And the way to do that is by making motions and having a vote. So those motions can take all kinds of shapes and sizes. Motions also have a hierarchy, so depending on what the type of motion it is, you might need to decide one motion before another motion. Again, this kind of is a running theme here, but we don't strictly follow Robert's rules. So you got to take some of this with a grain of salt. It's not something that you're strictly required to do, but that's just kind of the general flow. So main motions are generally intended to take some kind of final action regarding the agenda item. So a lot of times that'll be approving something, setting the date, something along those lines. So for council and for this board, a lot of times that's going to be a motion to approve. For this board, it may also be a motion to recommend approval or a motion to recommend it not be approved, something along those lines. But really the wording isn't going to have to change a lot when you're talking about your main motion. So one other thing is for several items, there are findings that the board is supposed to make pursuant to code, and that is most often going to happen with variances for this body. So when you look at our code, there's a number of things that the board is supposed to find before approving of a variance. And the easy thing to do with those is if you're going to be making a motion to approve, just state the reasons why you intend to support that motion when you're making the motion. And as long as you're getting those facts out there, and if the motion ends up being approved, those facts that you've stated are going to end up serving as those findings. So you can kind of kill two birds with one stone by doing that. Just a good practice to get into. Another tip on your main motions is that as much as possible you want them to be framed in the positive. So you may be looking to deny a specific action, but what you'll still want to do is phrase it as a motion to approve, and then you'd simply vote against that. It's easier for the record, and it helps keep the voting, keeps it easier for people to understand what they're really voting on when you're phrasing things in that direction. Because this board sometimes makes advisory recommendations, there's going to be some situations where you're not going to be phrasing something in the positive, but you just want to try to be clear about what it is you're proposing the board do and what your motion is and what people are going to be voting on. Some other common motions that will come up is a motion to amend. That's where you're proposing to add some condition to a motion that's already been made. So you could have had a motion to approve that was pending, got a second, and then after more discussion, somebody wants to make some additional condition on that. What you'd do is you'd make that motion to amend to add whatever condition that might be. You'd vote on the motion to amend, and then if the motion to amend passes, you'd go back and you'd vote on the original motion to approve or whatever it might be as amended by that later motion. So it sounds clunky, but it's pretty easy once you're actually doing it.
And that does not have to be made by the person that made the original motion. It can be somebody else that makes the motion to amend.
Correct. And I guess another thing, this might just be for Jay specifically here, but as a chair, you're also a sitting member on the board. So I know sometimes you're hesitant to make a motion yourself, but you're free to do that at any point, Jay. So.
Yeah, and usually if I do that, I will recognize that I do have the right to do that.
Yep.
You know, I have an advantage on this kind of stuff that none of you have. I spent 8 years in a rural school in South Dakota back in the 1950s and early 60s. And we had something called the YCL, which stood for Young Citizens League. And once every 6 weeks, we would have a YCL meeting and spend up to an hour talking about this kind of thing. Plus, I had the advantage of being in 4-H from the time I was 10 until I was 18. And we had a citizenship unit in those programs that covered this same kind of thing. So I've probably had more, plus I've been to, I don't know how many planners conferences to hear this kind of stuff. And I kind of try to pride myself that I know what I'm doing up here. Sometimes I need to be corrected, but I think most of the time I do a pretty good job, and that's just me. So thank you for the opportunity to tell a little background on how I think sometimes.
Okay, so moving on then. So we've got the motion to table, which comes up quite a bit too. As I say on the slide here, technically under Robert's rules, that's going to kill an agenda item, but the way that we treat it, it's really used more as a motion to postpone, which, you know, we don't have to strictly follow the rules. It's not a huge issue, but you could really do either one as long as you're clear about what you're doing with that action.
And if we do a motion to table, we should put a date to look at.
Yeah, so if you're going to do a motion to table or a motion to postpone, you want to either specify the date that that's coming back, or you want to state a specific condition that's going to trigger that to come back. And I think more often than not, that's, you know, all of the boards that the city has really do a pretty good job about that. So a few more motions that you might see. You have a motion to amend a previous action where, say you've taken action to, you know, somebody made a motion to approve a prior agenda item, but after the fact you come up with some other condition that you might want to add to that motion that's already been passed. So you'd make this motion to amend a previous action, you'd go back and you'd add whatever condition it might be to that item that you previously taken action on. The motion to reconsider is similar, except when you do a motion to reconsider, really you go back to that previous agenda item and you act on it like there was no prior vote. So you kind of start that whole item over again. And usually those are only intended to be used with something that's on that day's agenda. You wouldn't use one of those to bring back an item that you've acted on at a previous meeting. You also have the motion to limit or extend debate. You can place certain restrictions on there, most often related to limiting it to a certain amount of time or limiting duplicative testimony, that kind of thing. And you can use that same thing if you've established a time limit for a specific item. You can use the same motion to extend that time limit if you need to. You've also got the motion to close debate and vote immediately, which John pointed out for us earlier, often referred to as calling the question. What that does is that'll end any debate or discussion on it, and you'll take a vote on the pending motion immediately. But that motion to close debate and vote immediately itself has to be passed by 2/3 before you'd go and vote on the main motion.
Is that of just the present, or is 2/3 of the full?
So that one would be present, or 2/3 of those present.
And that basically, when you call the question, you have made and seconded that motion, at least that's my understanding, and the vote should be called immediately. That's the way I understand it. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that.
Well, you wouldn't be able to do a call to question if there wasn't a pending motion. So you'd have to have a motion seconded, and motion and a second on taking some kind of action, and then there could be a motion to call the question, and then the call the question motion would have to be passed by 2/3 vote, and then you'd vote immediately on the pending main motion.
The other thing that, when you talk about adjournment, you'll notice we always set a date early on. That gives me the authority to end the debate on motions and so on. I can adjourn the meeting at pretty much any time I want to, because we know when it's going to happen again. So that's my understanding of that.
Yeah,
The reasons for doing that.
I guess I'm probably have to do a little bit more research on that. I don't claim to be an expert on this procedure. I know enough to give this presentation. So I've got a whole book sitting in my office on this that I'd have to refer back to. But
Well, and it also depends on what the body, and I don't know if we have any rules. I've been on this body since the mid-1980s, and I've never, ever talked to anybody about whether we have rules of engagement, and that's not the proper term, but how we run things. I don't know if there's anything written down, but you're supposed to have those. And we just kind of run it the way it's always been run, I guess. So, and as long as nobody ever questions us legally, I think we're okay.
yeah, I would assume, and I've not done the research, but I'm guessing sometime a long time ago, they adopted some version of Robert's Rules of Orders, or implied that they were going to use those. Like I said, there's no legal requirement that you have to follow any specific set of guidelines. So you've also got the motion to recess, which this board probably isn't going to have a whole lot of use for. Council does that a lot when they have to recess and sit as the Board of Adjustment for certain agenda items. But and then you've also got dealing with the request to withdraw a motion. So somebody might have made a motion, it might got a second, and then after further discussion, the person that made that motion might want to withdraw that and allow somebody else to make an alternative motion. In theory, those would require a vote, but in most circumstances, as long as there's no objection, whoever made the motion is simply just allowed to withdraw it. Technically, once that motion's made, it belongs to the board, but the way that it ends up functioning, whoever made the motion is usually allowed to withdraw those as long as nobody else on the board objects. And then once that's done, that opens it up for anybody else to make an alternative motion. We've already kind of discussed that a motion is going to require a second in most situations. After a motion and a second, the presiding officer will allow discussion on the motion, and the discussion is generally limited to the board members at that point, and they'll be focused on tailoring whatever action they might want to take, or potentially discussing some of those facts that might lead to a finding that the board has to make something like that. Eventually, the board will vote on the motion. Most are decided by a simple majority, but some do require that 2/3 majority to pass. I also alluded to the hierarchy before, and we'll touch on that more in here in a second. And then once the agenda item's been voted on, the presiding officer will generally just move on to the next agenda item. So we'll take a quick look here at that hierarchy. Motions on the bottom are going to be a lower priority. Motions towards the top are going to be higher. So you can see, starting off at the bottom, main motion is one of the lower priority things that you'll you'll have. And then you can have primary amendments that'll amend the main motion. You can have secondary amendments that will amend an amendment. You can have motions to table, postpone. All of those will be decided in that order generally. So in conclusion, that's just a couple of tips that we ran over quick to try to keep things, help keep your meetings orderly. Those tips like keeping those motions framed in the positive, waiting till the speaker recognizes somebody, it can do a lot to help keep your meeting orderly and keep your record clean. One other thing to note is that the rules are not really intended to serve as a sword, so you don't want to unnecessarily complicate an item and bog it down in procedure. Generally, you want to let an item pass or fail on its merits instead of trying to take it out using some kind of procedural tool. So,
Let the lawyers figure out the procedure, whether we follow it or not.
so that's all I've got for you. I tried to keep it brief, and looks like I did a pretty good job of that.
Thanks, Justin. It's interesting to take a look at how things should be done and how we do things. You know, I try to, because we have already set a future date, I always try to make sure that there's no other business to come before this body when I adjourn the meeting. And I think that's the proper procedure, and we can do it, at least I feel we can do it, and Justin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if we look into future stuff. I don't think we need a motion as long as we have a future time.
A motion to adjourn?
Yes.
No, you don't.
So that's what I try to follow, and so I will go. Is there any other business to come before this body at this time? Hearing none, we are ready for public input. If you need to address the planning commission on an item that was not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium, state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken. Mr. Mayor, do you have a concern?
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
think you're done, so.
All right, thank you. Seeing no one come forward, we are adjourned.